All right. Hi there. I am Claire Horner, and this is Dr. Siddall Jones, and we
Hello.
are Reset Trauma Unstuck. And this is February's resource sharing event. And so our vision for this is that over time that we'll gather people who want to come together on a monthly basis and have a private conversation about resources, what you're reading, what you're listening to, what apps you have, what people you're following, what YouTube channels you like, all in the service of sexual trauma healing.
Mhm.
And um, so we are just getting started today. We have someone who's just joined us and is actually a friend of ours, uh, Eric. And we're not going to have people on camera today since we're
Mhm.
recording. So
Mhm.
we'll have a discussion a little bit later. So if we can turn mics off, that'd be great. And so today is Sadal and I've gathered resources over the month, and we never know whether we're going to have people here or not have people here. And like I said, over time, we're going to be moving towards having a private conversation with a group of people once a month. And so this is just our way to get started with that. So we are both private practice therapists, trauma therapists in Atlanta, Georgia. Our private practices are separate. This is a separate kind of passion project for us because we love
Mhm.
resources, and we've been working with people on connecting to their resources for a couple of years now. So let me hush and let it all speak.
Well, I think you kind of were just going right where I was going to go. Both of us having this passion for um, helping people heal from sexual trauma, helping them along their sexual healing journey, sexual trauma healing journey, and providing them with resources, support, information, etc. And that's kind of what we do here at Reset. So the purpose of our resource share really is because we feel like, whatever resources you have that are going to help you, that are going to assist you, whether that's, like Claire just mentioned, whether that is social media resources, tangible book resources, podcasts, etc. Whatever you have that's going to make you feel better, that's what we want to help you tap into. Sometimes it's difficult to find the right resource or know if the resource is valid, so to speak. And so this is our way of helping validate some of those fears and anxieties around what tools can help when you don't want to necessarily go right in. We talk a lot about, and Claire's going to talk in a second about just the freak out free process of identifying resources and why that's so important. And so this is our way of creating a freak out free space for resources. So I won't take over that part because that's for Claire.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that we have really thought a lot about and been passionate about in this year already in 2021 is that you are your own best resource because you have to decide what's best for you. And I know that's tricky. Trusting yourself after sexual assault or childhood sexual trauma is a tricky one. It can be a tricky one. But that's what we need to work towards because you're the only one. Each of us is the only one that knows what's too much, what's too little, what fits. If breath work is not your thing, don't do it until you're ready. So when we say freak out free process, the first step of that process is knowing that you're the one that gets to decide what type of resource is important to you. So you got to pick your type. And when I say type, I mean, do you like listening to things? Are podcasts what you like? Is music important to you? How can music help your healing process if listening to things is important? If you like reading, well, what books or blogs or journals maybe are out there that could help you in that process?
Mhm.
So pick your type and pick your level. Level meaning what stage are you at? Like, are you just getting started? Like the therapist thing, the therapy thing is like, like you're not ready for
Mhm.
that. Or have you been on this journey for 15 years? You've been through lots of different iterations, therapies, maybe medications and types of things. So what level are you at? And the freak out free approach means that you're not going to engage in something that's going to, what I call, jack up your nervous system, because with
Mm-hmm.
trauma, our nervous systems are already pretty jacked.
Yeah.
So
Or even trigger you. You don't want to do something that's going to trigger you to a space that you're not comfortable or you're not ready to go. And so the freak out free is that you do get to go at your own pace. You get to, you know, listen to your instinct and listen to your body in a way maybe that you've not done so in the past. And you get to tell yourself no, right? We always say it's okay to say no to yourself. Even if you start doing something along your journey, it's okay to stop, right? Which I think is really important as it relates to empowering and finding our own voice once we have been in a space of trauma or when we're healing from trauma. So that listening to our own voice in that space of, I'm not ready for this, or I don't want to do that, and listening to that is really important.
and you always say, let's say you start a podcast and you get 5 minutes in and you're like, no, this isn't good for me today.
Mm-hmm.
I can either come back to it, never come back to it, skip ahead,
Absolutely.
skip around. We get very, very
Stuck.
locked in sometimes, stuck and
Mm-hmm.
rigid. And that's why we call this trauma unstuck. We're
Unstuck.
trying to get
Mm-hmm.
out of those rigid processes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so why don't you were gonna I was gonna ask you, like, what is one thing you need to get started?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So something that I think is one, just the acknowledgement that resources are helpful or that you have resources around you that can be helpful on your journey. So that's the first thing. I think this month we've been focusing a lot on our resources have been really surrounding external. Like we know that our internal place is there. We did that in January. So we tapped into us being our own resources and tapping into ourselves. And now we're beginning to kind of expand a little bit and find out what are things that are happening in our current circle, right? Like not searching for new things, but in our current circle, what are things that are happening in our current circle that we can use as resources on our journey, right? So social media is a huge thing right now, whether that's YouTube or TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or whatever that is, those are resources that we already tap into, we already have at our fingertips. And sometimes we don't consider those being resources for our healing journey, but they can be. And so I think focusing on those areas of how to use our resources that we already have at our fingertips and see where in those spaces we can we can include our healing journey.
Yes, absolutely. I want to put some. I want to speak to something that Eric said. This is Eric Skorzynski, and he runs the Preacher Boys podcast and the Preacher Boys podcast Facebook group for people who are coming out of the Independent Fundamental Baptist organization and may have been abused within that organization or experienced toxic religious experiences growing up or once or over time. And so one thing he says is he was on a call, maybe even an interview, and the person said, before sharing your story, ask yourself if that wound is open or closed.
That's
I
good.
think that's some good advice. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's something we want to talk about at some point, is how you share your story is super important. Who you pick,
Hmm.
what you say, how
What you
you
talk
approach
about.
it.
Hmm.
And I like that. Ask yourself
Yeah.
if that wound is open or closed before you share your story. Absolutely.
That's
And that's
really good though.
it is. And to connect it to therapy, that may be a question that you go into therapy with. Like, I have a couple of people in my life who I'd really like to share what's going on with me and what's happened
Hmm.
over the years, but I don't just want to unload. I don't just want to tell them everything. How do
Right.
I set that up right? And that is a really good suggestion for how
Mhm.
how to check yourself before you even think or get to the part of opening your mouth about it.
Yeah, that's the piece of checking yourself, right? Because when you think of, you know, am I ready? Am I ready for whatever is going to happen? If this is a closed wound, am I really ready for it to possibly be open again? And if it's open, am I ready for the pain that may come from me kind of digging into that? And so there's a multiple assessments that go on, self-assessments, I think, that go on with that concept. And I think that's a really good way to put it. Checking into yourself, tapping into you before, going out, reaching out.
Because you are your own best resource.
Yeah,
And you're
that's
going to
it.
get tired of us saying that. And you might even have an internal reaction to that. And that's okay.
That's so okay. But it's so true. I think that's in this situation for the people who are joining, who've either experienced sexual trauma or even allies, right? And just in life, that's the space of you are your own best resource. No one knows you better than you. Even if they think they do, they don't. And it's once we get to a space of trusting ourselves, again, for some of us, right? Then we'll be able to better assess how we interact and how we engage externally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's jump into these February resources.
Let's jump in. Let's jump in.
Do you want to go first?
I can go first. You all know I love me some affirmations. So the first resource I have is actually a YouTube resource that I just found maybe 2 weeks ago. I started watching this YouTuber, and her name is Alana, Alanna Fox, Foxx, and her YouTube focuses on daily affirmations for healing. So they're specific for healing, whether that means trauma. It's not specific trauma, but it's emotional healing in general. And so I find that these are really good for the day. You I always say start off your day with an affirmation. I help let that affirmation carry day. And I really have grown over the last few weeks to really enjoy her daily affirmations. And so that's my first one, is that YouTuber. And so again, another resource, we've talked about some IG affirmation pages. We've talked about some apps and different things like that. But this was one, and there's several affirmation YouTube pages, but this was one that spoke specifically because she's a female and she talks about just the healing journey and how that process works in her affirmation. So I thought that this would be a good resource for our resource share this week.
I'm gonna tail off of that to say, there's an overwhelming amount of resources for women, and a missed area is men and resources for non-binary folks, and LGBTQ community and the trans community and all of that. And so I wanted to just mention UNstuck.org, which is specifically for men and the masculine experience. And they have a lot of stories, a lot of videos, a lot of, men in healing. And I don't know if they have an affirmations page, but I did want to mention that. Just kind of popped in my head, just to kind of
that's a good one.
Say that, make sure that everyone knows that this is not a channel or a space. Reset is not just the space for women.
Love that.
I'm going to go with an app first, which is called iChill. And it's available in English and Spanish. And it's out of the Trauma Resource Institute. So traumaresourceinstitute.com, called iChill. And it's based on the teachings of the community resiliency model. And so it comes out of a specific set of self-help skills that's already established. And so you'll learn simple information about how stress affects the mind and body and that kind of thing. I'm still digging into it, to be honest, to look at kind of their overview. I know it may be weird for me to just read and look down, but that's what's going to happen. Did you ever feel so amped up that you thought you were going to explode? Have you ever felt so numb? Have you ever felt so numb that nothing seemed to matter? What about trouble sleeping or eating too much or not enough? iChill shares with you a set of wellness skills called the Community Resiliency Model, CRM. Science tells us that when we exercise our resiliency muscle by practicing wellness skills, our well being expands. We
Mm.
have learned what we pay attention to grows. And it goes on, but iChill is the app, and it comes out of the Trauma Resource Institute.
Love that. I love those questions, right? Again, another space to check in, I think, when you have those questions that prompt, because sometimes it's difficult to do an assessment when you don't really know where to start. And so having something that kind of prompts us to do an assessment or do a check in for ourselves on how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what our experiences are, really does help us in that initial stage. Or even when we have been in a space where we've been hyper triggered, I like to say. Um,
Mm.
that assessment is important. Yeah.
COVID, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. On top of everything else.
Hmm. Yep.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So I will go again with an IG. I love my IG, y'all. So, so one of the IG pages that I've been following for a while is called Finding Your Inner Warrior. And we've talked about Nora before, and we've talked about her book. We've actually done an interview with her. Um, so she is not a foreign resource for us, but we've not really talked a lot about what she does with her Instagram and how she engages her followers on Instagram and helping them use their voice and helping them be aggressive in spaces maybe that they did not been aggressive before, and the freedom that she allows in the space that she creates for people to say what they mean to say what they want to say, and not feel guilty about it, not feel ashamed. And she has really done in my opinion, I think she's done a really good job encouraging and empowering the voice of those who've been in sexual trauma or have had sexual trauma or trauma in general, even if not sexual, but been traumatized in some way. So she does a really good job with that empowerment piece. And she is definitely a woman who believes in the warrior space, right? And so that time of we are not surviving, we are past thriving, we are warriors in our lives. And so that's what she does. And I really do like the empowerment of her IG page. And I think that's a good way to start. I think that's a good space of that passive engagement, that passive encouragement that may help you or motivate you in some way to move to a more aggressive and resource and stuff. So I love Nora's IG page. So it's Finding Your Inner Warrior. It's her IG page.
And she was an assertiveness coach, which
Mm-hmm.
I like. That's
Yes.
finding that assertive place where we're not being passive or aggressive or
Mm-hmm.
passive aggressive is
Yeah.
is tough. Can be tough.
But asserting your voice. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
My next one is what we call a therapist finder. And there are a lot of different types of therapist finders out there. A common one is psychologytoday.com. And so this one is relatively new. A colleague told me about it, and it's specifically for EMDR in Georgia. So it is an EMDR finder, a therapist finder in Georgia, and it's the Georgia EMDRnetwork.com. And we'll put these down below, of course, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can look those up easily. As we get better at production, we put some clips of some of these and
Mm-hmm.
pictures in here. We are learning, y'all. So
Absolutely.
you're on the journey with us. So that's the Georgia EMDR network. I guess I should say what EMDR is. So if you haven't heard of EMDR, it's a type of therapy where it works with the different hemispheres of your brain. The quickest way I noticed to talk about it is that it is a way to unlock the trauma within your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because traumatic experiences are so neurological, and we
Mm-hmm.
know that we're in a great time of information about the nervous system, and getting better at knowing what therapies are going to be helpful beyond talk therapy talk therapy is great, but it is not the be
Mm-hmm.
all end all. It just
Mm-hmm.
isn't. And even as
Absolutely.
a, a talk therapist, I'm going to say that sometimes we need multiple therapies, kind of put together. And
Mm-hmm.
so EMDR, and I always get the letters all messed up, but eye movement
Desensitization,
something reprocessing.
desensitization, reprocess, eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing.
Yes. So the reprocessing part and the I
Mm-hmm.
part is important. And there are therapists who are doing that online now. It is, I believe that they're doing it a little bit differently. And I know therapists who are
Mm-hmm.
doing extra training in order to provide really good care for EMDR online right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Georgia EMDR network.com.
Yes. And I think what is important to know is that this is a form of neurological work that is being done. And so individuals who do this are highly trained, and it's definitely a process that the trainers and the therapists go through to ensure that they're keeping clients safe when they're taking them to that place in their brain, and they're able to bring them back from that place in their brain in a safe way. So you're absolutely right about it's still being done virtually. It's just being done a different way. But it's one of those modalities that trauma therapists use to really assist individuals who are healing from deep trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good
And
one.
it's really effective. I mean, it certainly is one of those that is helpful to have a really good connection with the therapist and a good relationship there, trust and that kind of thing. But there
Mhm.
are also some, I would say, skills that go along with an EMDR session that you can use
Mhm.
on your own. One of them is safe place, and the therapist really helps you to find that place that you can go back to and kind of call up for yourself when you need it. And so there are some, like I said, some adjacent skills that go along with EMDR that are really helpful.
Absolutely. Along that same line of neurological and physical things, my next resource really are medical doctors. So we talked this month about taking care of yourself externally, right? Like going to doctor's appointments, doing those basic needs that you need, which are sometimes avoided. Going to an OBGYN can be traumatic, right? Going to a dentist can be traumatic. Going to a doctor in general may be traumatic for you or triggering, I'll say, for you. But I think it's important to, one, not just go to a doctor, but find medical professionals who provide trauma informed care. And what I mean by that is that they understand when a patient has experienced a trauma of some kind and they're sensitive to that. So they're able to provide the service that you need, whether that means dental work or your monthly or weekly or yearly checkups. So not weekly, but yearly checkup. They're able to do that in a way that is sensitive to where you are and what you need emotionally. And I think that's so important for medical doctors. I think having a therapist is great. You know that that's a safe space. But when you have to do those things, we say basic care needs, right? When you have to do those things, but you're not comfortable, you're not safe, and the person who is providing the service isn't really sensitive to that, or they're not aware of that, or they don't know what to do and how to walk you through still getting the service, but still nurturing and caring for who you are and where you are on your journey, that can be really difficult and that can be re traumatizing. And so I think it's important when we're going to this space of you're your own best thing, do things at your own pace, find your external resources, then you start extending to taking care of yourself, right? So now we want to take care of our medical needs. And so having someone who is trauma informed is really helpful. And what you would do is when you go to or look up your doctor, you can always ask that question. Um, and you can also look at sometimes websites now have that we have trauma informed services or we have trauma informed providers. They have that on their website. But you can always ask the receptionist if you feel comfortable with that, or either the nurse. You can always ask them about the trauma informed care and how how that works in that doctor's office so that you can get what you need. And there may be one person who's trained, and so that will be the person that they send you to get the services that you're looking to get. But either way, you want to be able to, again, use your voice and advocate for yourself in that way and ask for the service. But trauma informed medical professionals is what I think is a huge resource as we're looking at external resources. And many doctors, I have lots of friends who are doctors that they have IG pages that's specific for their practice. And so, and on their IG page, they talk about being trauma informed and providing trauma informed care. So when we're looking at, well, how does medical doctors relate to social media? Because you could probably find your medical doctor on social media that a professional page for them, and they talk about trauma informed care and how they provide that service. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, you may, when you ask that question, you may get a
right,
but
right.
But there are plenty you're gonna also get an answer of absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's definitely becoming an increasingly it's becoming increasingly more of a priority for medical professionals as of late. Maybe I'll say the last 5 to 10 years. That's been something that has been very high on the radar for medical professionals.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, my last one is, well, I have sort of a side note after this one, but my last specific resource is the Sand Sound Center, and this is in the UK. And this is actually a therapist. Her name is Masha Bennett, and she is in a Facebook group that we're in called Trauma Thrivers. And she put this up last week in our kind of sharing what we're into and what we're doing. And she put up a blog post that I thought was really helpful. And so it's called How to Get the Best from a Gong Meditation. And so on the page, again, I kind of pulled that up. They are doing, if you're not familiar with sound therapy, it's just another way to have the nervous system relax. I would say it probably falls under the woo-woo category, but I don't mind. There's so many things that we need to pull together in our healing process, and anything related to our senses is going to help us with that. So I just thought this was really helpful. And she talks about a gong bath, and a sound bath is really just being in a space, and it may be headphones, right? It may be having good headphones in, and having that sound kind of wash over you. And that's what would be a sound bath. So that's a specific of something that she goes into to kind of understand what this is about. I think meditation as it relates to trauma can be tricky. A lot of things are tricky. You hear me use that word a lot. But meditation, when it's focused on a particular thing, can be a good way to start. And with somebody leading it can be a really good way to start. And there's there's crystal bowls, there's tuning forks, there's all manner of sound therapy. And so again, I'll put that information below for that blog post. But Sand Sound Center is the website, and there also is a Facebook page called Sand Sound Soul. I really like.
I love that, Sand Sound Soul. That's a good one. Yeah, I think you're right about sometimes meditation being. Oh, I was just saying, I think you're correct about meditation being sometimes difficult, that breathing space. But then again, listening to yourself, and if that's not necessarily what you want to do, even finding a smaller way to do it, or a less intensive way, I'll say, to do it. So yeah.
Yeah. So the only other thing I wanted to go into is I did a post last week, I believe, for our tips. Each week we do tips and resources. And then this is our, the resource share on the last Thursday of the month is where we share some that we've gathered ourselves over the months. And again, hopefully we will get to a place where we have a community where we can come together and have a private conversation
Mhm.
and share those and get support that way. A space where you don't have to talk about your trauma specifically, and you can just talk about what you're learning and what tools you're using. But I
Mhm.
talked about your social media healing team. And what I mean by that is we need a lot of people on our healing team. And for social media, that would mean, who do you follow that has posts that they put up that really just either put words, like the affirmations, like put words to things you really need to hear, or
Mhm.
put words to experiences that you've had that you thought you were alone in, or people who do posts, or maybe they do short videos talking about something in their life that you just really identify with. Who's that person that you follow, or that YouTube channel? It could be YouTube, TikTok, any of the social media platforms
Mhm.
that really speaks to you. And maybe it's 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, and that's who you're reaching out to.
Mhm.
And those people are on your team. And if
Yeah.
you don't have a list of people, I would say a good 20, maybe, just as a ballpark number, of channels and people to follow and people to spark, laughter. I would
Mhm.
say comedians would be on my healing team.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be intense, right? Because it's a healing process. And so, because it's a process, there's going to be ebbs and flows in that. And so, you're going to have spaces where you do need to laugh, where you do need to watch a YouTube video and laugh, or you need to, go to someone's Facebook group or Facebook page and kind of get some inspiration or be encouraged. So, yeah, comedians for sure. Music, even, a music channel is
Yeah,
definitely a space of healing for me. So, like you said, comedians would be on yours and music would be on mine. Hmm.
me too. For sure. And artists. I really like graffiti artists in the Atlanta area. I follow several graffiti artists, and that may be something that's that speaks to you as well. So your social media healing team, think about it. See who's already on there. See who you might want to reach out to at particular times when you're having particular difficulties or particular joys. People that really celebrate with you, or celebrate, people who are celebrating their body, and
Hmm.
body positivity, and really embracing that. I know that word's being used a lot right now. um, so your social media healing team, I think, is super important. Who is contributing to your journey?
And that's the key, I think. The takeaway is, are these things contributing? What is actually contributing to you moving through and processing through your healing journey, whatever that looks like for you.
Hmm. And
Because
you
you
may use
have
other
to,
words. I just kind of heard
hmm,
that in my head. You may use path, you may use road, you may use,
right.
whatever
Hmm.
this meandering labyrinth of a
Whatever
journey
space this
is.
is. Yeah, whatever space this is.
Yeah,
Who's helping you along that space?
yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. That's what we've got for February, and we'll be back in March. And in the meantime, certainly join us on Reset Trauma Unstuck on Instagram and YouTube as well. And we'll be kind of growing our services and hopefully getting more to you.
Absolutely.
Take care, y'all. Have a good week.
Bye, y'all.